Hi everybody, this is Maya Zahira with Psychic Protection Sanctuary, and we are now live in our Spiritual Empowerment Community Facebook group. I'm doing something a little bit different today. I'm not live video, I'm live audio, and I hope you guys can all adapt to that. So we're going to jump right in. Our conversation today is about soul contracts or soul agreements. And so before we get into talking about that, what it is and how it has an impact in your life, while we're waiting for people to join live, I've decided I'm going to go ahead and get our announcements out of the way at the beginning. So first, a shout out to all the people listening or watching the replay, either on Facebook or YouTube. I love you guys. Thanks for watching the replay. And a shout out to everybody who's joining us live right now as well. Now, I want to be super clear here that my goal always when I do a Facebook Live is twofold. And number one is to share free information with the community. I very much believe in sharing, putting information out there, and giving a lot of it away for free because I know so many of us need it, right? So part of it, so the first goal is sharing the information, so the teaching, the learning part. But the second goal that I always have with our Facebook Live classes is to develop relationship. And so just being really upfront about that, to let you all know that that is why I intentionally take time to say hi to everybody, and we're going to do shout outs in just a moment. And so as you're joining live, I would love for you to tell us where you're joining from. So tell us where you're joining from. And I also have a question for you to think about. You could start typing while I'm finishing up the announcements here. So the question is, if you are already aware of what a soul contract is, then do you believe that you have any soul contracts? Are there any soul contracts that you personally are already aware of for your own life? Now, if you don't know what soul contracts are, don't worry about it. I just wanted to give an opportunity for everybody to share, for anybody who wants to share at the beginning. So while I'm finishing up announcements, go ahead and let me know where you're joining from. And if you already know what soul contracts are, do you have any soul contracts that you are already aware of? And feel free to share what those are if you feel called to do so. So continuing with just a couple of more announcements, and then we'll get into our lesson about soul contracts. Now, I always want to give out this information, not because I want to be like an advertising video or anything like that, but I always know that there are a few people listening or watching who would like to go further or who need more support and need more help. And I would be remiss if I didn't make sure that I told you where to go for more help if you need it, or if you're eager to learn more, where you can go to get that. So the first place is my website, which is www.psychicprotectionsanctuary.com, and you'll see a whole bunch of information about what I do, and you can schedule a session or sign up for the 12-month online Spiritual Empowerment Academy. That's my main thing that I do, is the academy, and I love all my students in there. We go really deep. We do all sorts of things in there. I won't go into the whole spiel about that. You can just go to the website, psychicprotectionsanctuary.com, and you can just, under the events tab, check out any of the events, including the academy, that might be of interest to you. And there's also there's some free videos, and there's a lot of cool stuff on the website. So feel free to take a look at that. And if you're watching the replay of this on YouTube, This Facebook Live is happening in one of my free Facebook groups, and the free Facebook group is Spiritual Empowerment Community. This is my Facebook group that's a little lighter. It's not quite as intense as my other Facebook group. And we post uplifting posts in there, stories. We share, and we talk about developing your spiritual gifts in this group. If you're having issues with psychic protection, like you're having a hard time managing your energy in the world, you're feeling really drained or overwhelmed, or on the other extreme, you're dealing with like unwanted paranormal activity or even a psychic attack or some really crazy, scary stuff, that is my superpower, I guess you could say. That's the big thing that I help people with. And that free support group is on Facebook, and it is Psychic Protection Sanctuary Facebook group. Psychic Protection Sanctuary Facebook group. So if you're having trouble managing your energy, or you're having a more extreme situation, then that's the place to go, and it's free. Like I said, I'm a big believer in doing a lot of stuff free for the community. You'll notice on my website I do charge for some things, because this is what I do full time, you guys. This is how I pay my rent for my simple, I love living simply. That just makes me really happy. But this is what I do full time, and I do have some services that I charge for, but there's tons of free stuff. So welcome if you're new. I'm just so glad to meet you. Usually I do these on video, making an exception today. I hope you all can adapt to that. Those of you who are in my program know why. I actually accidentally injured my eye because I'm just so multi-talented that I poked myself in the eye, and it's super like dark red, and looks really bad on video. So I thought, rather than freaking people out who join in the middle of the video and are like, what's wrong with her eye, we're just going and doing the audio, because what's really important is the message and the voice resonance as well. Now we're done with announcements, and before we get into our lesson all about soul contracts, if you're just now joining us live, then go ahead and share where you're joining from, and if you're aware of any soul contracts that you have. And hey, those of you who are watching the replay anywhere on social media, you can share where you're joining from as well, and go ahead and share any soul contracts that you're aware of. If you don't know what a soul contract is, you're in the right place, because I'm going to explain it in just a couple minutes. Since this one of our goals here is to develop relationship, before we get into the learning part, I'm going to do shout outs and say hi to everybody. So give me a second while I look at comments. Marnie says that she's joining from Tucson and she's not sure what it is. Well, Marnie, I think you're going to find this topic really interesting, and I can't wait to see you again. And I think we're going to talk about this more. I have this feeling that this is going to spark a lot of ideas I just have this feeling. And so we'll have a good conversation later about this and how this ties in with why you ended up with your family members and your partner and all that stuff. Nora says, yes, I have a negative soul contract. Yeah, we're going to touch on that as well. So thank you, Nora. Nora says she's joining from the road in Van Horn, Texas, in my hotel room. Yay, I was going to message you and ask if you had made it home, but I forgot that it's a few days drive. So safe travels. I'm glad you're settled into your hotel room. Okay, let me just double check. I'm going to see if we have any more comments. All right, let me grab a sip of water, and we're going to get into our lesson. Okay. I'm just laughing about what I'm going to say next. If you are like very student oriented, very learning oriented, like I am, I'm a lifelong learner. I love taking notes. I love having my notebooks. This is the kind of lesson, actually a lot of these free classes are notebook worthy. So if you feel called to do so, go ahead and grab a notebook. The thing is when you listen to things, when you listen to a class online, you may have noticed that you listen to it and it's interesting, but then later you don't remember most of it. So if you jot down some notes as we go, then you'll be more likely to remember everything. And you can also look back later on your notes. And I have this feeling like this topic is going to initiate maybe some journaling for some of you, just some thoughts and ideas. And my kitty is making a cameo. She's meowing. She wants to go outside, but she's not gonna because I'm busy right now. Okay. Oh, and Zahira is joining us from Renton, Washington. Hi, Zahira. Good to see you. Hey, Kit, I assume you guys can hear me okay? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me okay before I jump into our lesson. So, long story short, grab a notebook if you feel guided to take notes. I do encourage it. Give me a thumbs up, you guys, or hearts. Give me some love so I know that you can hear me really well. Okay, good. Awesome. Thanks, you guys. Now let's jump right into our lesson. Thanks. Lots of hearts, lots of thumbs ups. Cool. So today we're talking about soul contracts, which are also sometimes called soul agreements, which are also sometimes called spiritual contracts. But most of the time, I'm just going to use the term soul contracts. This is something that I personally know a lot about, but I do want to let you know, so I don't forget at the end, that there's a book out there by another author, not by me, that is a really good book on this subject if you feel like you want to read more and go deeper. And let's see, I pulled this book up on Amazon before I hopped on live. Excuse me, let me get a drink. All right, so this book is called Sacred Contracts. Oh yeah, that's another term that's used for it. But I think soul contracts is the most common term that I hear bouncing around out in the spiritual world. But the book is called Sacred Contracts. It's called Sacred Contracts, Awakening Your Divine Potential by Carolyn Mace. And the last name is spelled M-Y-S-S. So if you type in Sacred Contracts and M-Y-S-S on Amazon or go to your local bookstore, she's a very popular author in the spiritual world. So I'm sure you'll have an easy time finding it. It's a really good book and it breaks everything down. It's really fascinating. All right, so now let's talk about what soul contracts are. These are agreements that you make before this lifetime. And what I mean by before this lifetime, I'm going to pause for a second. Zahira says, awakening your what? Oh, she didn't hear me. Awakening Your Divine Potential was the name of the book. So it's called Sacred Contracts, Awakening Your Divine Potential by Carolyn Mace. Thanks, Zahira. Maybe I talked away from the microphone for a moment. Okay, so let's talk about what these are. These soul contracts, sacred contracts. These are agreements that you make before this lifetime. Now, before this lifetime, what I mean by that is when you are on the other side. I'm not referring to past lives, if you believe in past lives. When I say it's an agreement, hi Kitty. When I say that it's an agreement that you've made before this lifetime, what I'm talking about is when you are in spirit. When you are in spirit, before you come into this lifetime, There is a time when it's literally a time when you make, kitty, she's gotten into this habit where she starts meowing and it distracts me. So there's literally a time when you're on the other side when you will meet with different souls, and you'll meet with your guardian angels and your other guardians, and you'll make decisions about what you're going to do in this life. For example, what life lessons you are choosing to learn, who you want to be in relationship with, who you want your family to be. And much of that is chosen. Now, you don't necessarily have soul contracts, agreements for every single thing and every single relationship. This is what I've seen, is that you don't have agreements for every single thing in your life. But there are some things that you have contracts for, and some things you have very strong contracts for. So, hey, Vashti, you want to come up here? If I was on video, I could pick her up and you guys could see her. Alrighty. So I'll give you an example. I did, I think it was last month, I was at a psychic fair and I did a couple of readings throughout the day, and two stood out to me because both of the readings, the people were asking about moving, whether they should move to a different city. And so what stood out to me was that both had that moving theme, but what was interesting is that the first person that I did the moving reading for, what I saw was that she was literally going to be required to move. There was going to be no choice. Well, I mean, we always have free will. I mean, we can just say, no, I'm not going to do it. But what I saw was that she has a soul contract, that she has an agreement that she made before this lifetime, very set in stone, that she is supposed to move to that other city at this time in her life. She is not supposed to stay here. Okay? But then an hour later, I did another reading for somebody, and she was looking at moving, and we were looking at what cities to consider. And what I saw for her was, yes, you could move. And this is what I'm sensing about your life in that new city. But you could move or not move. It literally doesn't matter. You don't have a contract for it. You could do it either way, and your life will still unfold pretty much the same. I mean, obviously there's going to be differences, but it's still going to unfold according to whatever your plan was. Okay, so that's an example of the fact that some things we have soul contracts for, that we really are supposed to do those things, and in other areas it doesn't really matter, and we have a lot of wiggle room with free will. Okay. As I'm going, if there's anything that doesn't make sense or any questions that you have, go ahead and jump in and ask. And Hamad is saying, hello all. Hey Hamad, tell us where you're joining from. Okay, so back to further defining soul contracts. Soul contracts are focused primarily on the life lessons that you have chosen. And the life lessons that you've chosen, the purpose of those lessons is for your soul to evolve, for you to learn and grow, and for your soul to evolve. Now, I want to just point out right now, earlier, Nora mentioned a negative soul contract. Right now, I'm going to be focusing mainly on the positive ones just to keep it simple. And then I'm going to wrap it around to some of the negative stuff that can happen. But most of the focus of this video is going to be about just general soul contracts, the positive ones. And then I'm going to give you a little bit of introductory information about the negative ones, and where to go to get more information on that. So just FYI. So most of your soul contracts are focused primarily on, it's very intentional. You decide what life lessons you've chosen, what life lessons you wish to have, and really the intent is for your soul to evolve. Now, remember, you do have free will, but you also have contracts. And I think those of you who have pets probably understand what I'm going through right now. She does this when I start talking a lot. She just wants to match my voice. Okay, thanks for understanding, you guys. So yes, you have free will, but you also have contracts. When I do psychic readings for people, I'll see, I can psychically see their timelines unfolding as I'm doing the reading, and I can see different forks in the road, different choices, and certain areas where they're not supposed to have a choice. They're definitely supposed to go this direction, or they could choose between these three things. So it's kind of complicated in that like every single thing in your life is not necessarily predetermined, but you do have this thing called soul contracts. Okay. I hope that is clear as mud, because a lot of our realities in life and in the spiritual are not necessarily clear cut. So yes, we have free will, but yes, we also have contracts that we have chosen. All right, I have some thoughts on that, but I'm going to hold off. Let's keep defining this, and then we're going to talk about revoking contracts in a little bit. So we're going to talk about types of soul contracts, but first I'm going to just shout out to Savannah. Savannah Rose says, I feel like I'm currently fulfilling some soul contracts in my life right now. That's wonderful. Hey, Dario. Hey, stranger. How are you doing? Wonderful. Okay, so types of soul contracts. As I mentioned before, you may have contracts that you chose to be with certain family members, friends, to have a parent or parents that you have in this lifetime, children. You may have children that you've intentionally chosen via soul contract. That makes it more solid. I mean, obviously, if you have 5 children, you know, you have some level of agreement for them to come in. But for some, if you have a really solid soul contract, that's a very strong connection. But for others, like when I'm doing readings for mothers-to-be, I'll see like 3 or 4 souls of babies around them. And there's not a really hard and fast soul contract for any of them. And it's up to the free will of those babies which one decides to come in. So maybe that helps you understand like the kind of spectrum of, here is a hard and fast soul contract that's like really black and white, and then there's the free will, right? So your children, you might have soul contracts with one or more of them. Your soulmate, again, these are all maybes. You might have a soul contract with your partner, with your soulmate. Again, I do psychic readings, I do love readings all the time for people. And I'll be doing a reading for someone, and I'll say, here's this wonderful partner coming. You are going to have a wonderful relationship together. It's a great connection. And they'll say, well, do we have a soul contract? I'll be like, well, no, you've never had any past lives together. You've never had, you know, you don't have that soul contract, like requirement bond, but this person's coming, and don't turn them down, because it's going to be a great relationship. So you can have relationships where you don't literally have a soul contract, but some you do. And I'm somebody that you can ask, by the way. You probably figured that out. If you're wanting to know about any of your relationships, is this a soul contract relationship or is it something else? Then that's something I can check on. You may have a soul contract to stay single. You may have a soul contract as to whether you're going to have children or not have children. You may also have some soul contracts which you have freely chosen intentionally on purpose, in which you experience adversity in your life, like poverty, illness, struggle, some kind of life lesson that's challenging. You may have karma that you are working on balancing out, and so you choose to have an adverse life circumstance in order to balance out those karmic energies, or there's a lesson that you're wanting to learn, or you are volunteering to help transmute some of the energies on the earth. And there are people on the earth who, for example, are experiencing illness, that their soul intentionally chose it, and it's because they have volunteered to transmute huge amounts of challenging energy on the planet. And that's why they made a soul contract for the illness. Now, that doesn't mean that the illness isn't challenging. It doesn't mean that their personality in the here and now is choosing to have the illness. This was an agreement that their soul made before they were even in a body and even had this personality. Okay? Now, I've talked about some of these adverse circumstances, and there are instances where you can decide, enough already, I'm done with this soul contract, let's revoke this now. And so I'm going to talk about that in a minute. You can revoke contracts that were made freely, that you made as a soul. You knowingly made agreements to experience adversity. You weren't tricked into it. But at some point in your life, you as a person, as a human being, are deciding, enough already. I think I need to be done with that soul contract. And there's ways that you can clear that. That's something I can help with as well. Okay, so we're going to keep going, but I see a comment from Dario. Dario says, "Hi, Maya. Hi, Yvette. Good to see you too." And Savannah says, "The loss of a child. I'm so sorry. My heart goes out to you." Okay, let me get a quick drink and then we'll continue. All right. Continuing to talk about types of soul contracts. We also have soul contracts related to life lessons, as I mentioned before. So let me give you an example. Let's say that when you are on the other side, you're still a spirit, and you're making plans for this next incarnation, and you decide, I would like the theme of my life to be about prosperity. Maybe you want the theme to be about prosperity. So you could either choose to experiment and have experiences with prosperity in this lifetime by choosing to be rich. Maybe you're born into a family that has a lot of money. Or maybe you intentionally choose via your soul contracts to experience the theme of prosperity through intentionally choosing poverty, so that you can experience the lack of prosperity and experience what that feels like. Now, again, as I'm talking about these adverse circumstances, I'm not in any way saying that we should look at all the poor people in the world and just say, well, they chose it. It was their soul contract. Therefore, we're not even going to help them. Like, that's called spiritual bypassing. That's ridiculous thinking. That's a ridiculous line of thinking. We need to make sure we don't go in that direction. So let's not misapply or overapply these concepts. Okay. So, but it is true that there are many people who will choose to explore prosperity, and they choose to experience it through the adversity of that, right? And listening to this, you might feel like there's some life lesson that you chose, but you chose the adversity aspect, right? Some kind of life challenges. Or maybe if your life theme that you're choosing is prosperity, maybe you decide, well, I want to be raised in a household that's very, very poor. And then I want to make a lot of money when I'm an adult so that I can experience, know what it feels like to have that shift, that expansion. Okay. Or vice versa. Maybe I want to be born into a lot of money and I want to lose it all and feel what that feels like. There's a lot of different reasons why you would want to have all these experiences. I was just using prosperity as a simple example, but there's just a million different themes that you could choose for your life. And the whole idea is for your own evolution, for learning, for growth, for deepening of your soul. Okay. You also may have soul contracts regarding the exact time of your birth, because this is going to affect how you interact in the world, your personal astrology, for example. When I do readings for people, I also see that oftentimes they will have soul contracts for their death, for when they decide to exit the lifetime. But a lot of times what I see is that they may not, excuse me, they may not have chosen just one window to step out. They may choose, that they may have like 3 or 5 different possible windows, doorways, opportunities when they could step out of the lifetime. And then when they're in living the life, then they might choose, like their personality, their consciousness, or their subconscious might choose to exit at any of those exit points. I'm talking a lot. My throat's getting dry. Okay. You might have soul contracts for significant life events. Maybe you had an accident, or some kind of positive breakthrough of some kind. Okay, a marriage, a promotion, a certain job. Maybe your life purpose, your career. Maybe you have a soul contract for that. I see when I do psychic readings for people, I see some people have a soul contract related to the job or the career that they're in, and some people don't. Like that just wasn't important to their soul. They could do any old job, they could do anything really, as long as they are connected with their family, because they have strong soul contracts with their family, for example, right? Can you guys think of any other examples of soul contracts? I know some of you, this idea of soul contracts is brand new, so no pressure on you guys. But those of you who are a little bit familiar with soul contracts, can you think of any other examples that maybe I haven't covered, or any that you're aware of that you feel that you have in your life? Anything that you've been experiencing that you feel like isn't just haphazard, but that you feel like there's a contract that you agreed to have it this way in this lifetime. All right, looking at comments. Okay, hang on a second. And I am gonna suck on a mint. I know it might be noisy, but that'll help with the throat dryness. Okay, oh, I thought we had a comment, but we don't. Okay, now we're gonna talk about, are all soul contracts good? So I kind of mentioned that a couple of times earlier. So let's dive into this. Are all soul contracts good? There's different answers to this, so I'm going to go through them. The first answer is yes. All soul contracts are good. Even adversity deepens us. Okay. Now, don't throw tomatoes at me if you have some negative soul contracts and you're like, how can that be? I'm going to give some opposite answers here. Okay. So one level of truth is that yes, every single soul contract is for your benefit, including the ones that are negative the ones that are learning through adversity, and the ones that you may have been tricked into. And we're going to talk about that at the end. That's more of like a negative spiritual interference scenario. Even those actually, on one level of truth, they are beneficial, because there was an agreement on some level, there was an understanding that these were things that you needed to learn, that you were choosing to learn. For example, some of you know that I went through a major, really scary psychic attack scenario in 2016. It was very scary. I thought this paranormal situation was going to kill me. I'm not going to go into that whole story because that's kind of from my other group, but my other Facebook group, Psychic Protection Sanctuary. But suffice it to say, like on a personality level, like me as a human being, I'm like, hell no, why would I have ever chosen that? I mean, like, no, I don't choose that. That was clearly some kind of negative soul interference, right? There was some stuff messing with me. But if I just kind of calm down a little bit and I say, yes, it's true that I was victimized. That's true. But there can be multiple truths simultaneously. So yes, it is true that I was victimized, that there was some hijacking that happened, spiritual hijacking. But also, what is also simultaneously true is that that was supposed to happen because it was supposed to put me on the track of where I am now and the work that I'm doing now. Does that mean that it wasn't traumatic? No, it was super traumatic. Does that mean that I shouldn't be upset about what happened? No. So you may have experienced some kind of trauma, for example, or some like negative, really bad negative spiritual interference, and the victimization may be very real. And we're not discounting that at all. But on another level, if you sit with it, you realize, oh, this is happening because I'm supposed to learn about this, or it's happening because through adversity, I'm supposed to be forced to find my own power, for example. I'm supposed to be pushed into standing in my power in a whole different way. You see what I mean? Okay, so that's why the answer is yes, all soul contracts are good, but also no, all soul contracts are not good. There are many that are good, like if you've chosen your pets, you've chosen your soulmate, you've chosen to be a teacher in this lifetime, or you've chosen to, all these different really wonderful things that you've chosen. But some soul contracts, especially those that are connected with situations of adversity or negative spiritual interference, sometimes we get to the point where we say, no, this is no longer serving me. Maybe I needed it on some level before, but I think we need to be done with this now. This soul contract is no longer serving my highest good. Okay, and then when that's the case, then there is work that can be done to revoke, release those soul contracts. Okay, I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Back to our question, are all soul contracts good? Yes, no, and also there can be negative spiritual interference. That's not really what this video is about, but I'll give you a referral to another video in a minute. Negative spiritual interference is when there is an entity or a dark force that may trick you somehow into making an agreement They can trick you through making you think that you're agreeing to something that's different than what's actually being agreed upon, or they can trick you through lying or deception or making you feel guilty or confused so that you agree to something. And why would that happen? If you are supposed to have a soul contract for a really important life mission on the planet, there can sometimes be negative interference that comes in to trick you to accept a really adverse life circumstance. For example, to agree to be born into a family where there's horrific abuse, for example, so that your soul will be so squashed down that it will be hard for you to accomplish your soul mission on the earth. That's an example of why that kind of interference could happen, okay? Now, soul contracts, this is actually a topic that a lot of spiritual teachers know about and talk about and work with. The negative spiritual interference aspect, that's something that I know about because of my specialty in psychic protection. And so I know a lot more about that than the average teacher, who mainly knows about the positive soul contracts and the soul contracts of adversity that are intended for our learning. If you are experiencing a negative soul contract, negative spiritual interference that I mentioned, then there are ways to undo that and revoke those agreements as well. Okay, I see we have a couple comments. We're almost done. I'm gonna give you some resources and wrap things up in just a minute. Give you more information on how you can explore more. But let's look at our comments and questions. I see we have questions. Zahira says, can a person go to any lifetime, say back in time? I think I understand what you're asking, Zahira, but if I answer it incorrectly, please ask again and explain it differently for me. I think what you're asking is, can you explore your past lifetimes and take note of any soul contracts you had in those lifetimes? Is that what you're asking? And if that's what you're asking, then yes. If you're doing a past life regression, or a healer like myself is looking at your past lives for you, then oftentimes we can see that, oh yes, the theme of that life was blah, 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 and you had a soul contract, a very strong soul contract to experience da 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 in that lifetime. And then that past life that energy of that past life can be like a shadow effect that's having a bit of an effect on you now. So that's a little different than like a direct soul contract that you made coming into this lifetime. So we're kind of making it complicated, but this is a really important question that Zahira asked, that we have our soul contracts that we made before coming into this lifetime. But another thing that can affect your themes and your experiences in your life is your past lives. And you had soul contracts for those. It gets really interesting when you're psychic like me and you can go back and see all these different lifetimes. It's really interesting, but it's like this whole web. I hope that was what you meant, Zahira, and if not, then go ahead and ask again. Hamad says, what is the point of soul contracts in the first place if we can clear it here? Right, that's a good question. So most of your soul contracts, you're not going to want to clear. These are things that you intentionally chose and that you're going to go ahead and live out. But like maybe 1/10 of people's soul contracts, they might say, okay, enough already. I'm done with this. I'm going to turn on my fan, you guys. I hope it's not too noisy. Okay. Hope that doesn't get too loud, but it's super hot here in Arizona. So I didn't mean to make it sound that every single one of your contracts you're going to revoke, because most of them you're not. Most people live their lives and they go through and live out all of their soul contracts. But every once in a while, people will feel really challenged with something, or there's some kind of negative interference. And in those cases, yes, it is possible. If you know what to do, then you can take some steps through energy work, through working with an energy healer or a psychic, or doing it yourself to clear some of those contracts. I hope that helps clarify, Hamad. Savannah says, I feel that with the loss of my daughter, I now recognize that it was an important catalyst to my growth as a human and spiritual being. My path would not be what it is without that pain and loss. Yeah. I can see how that would be so true. And my guess is that it took some time and some healing to have that clarity. So all of us on here who are listening to this and learning about soul contracts, just a reminder that we don't ever want to misapply these concepts. So for example, if we have a friend who lost a child, when they're in the midst of when they're in the throes of the grieving, that is not the time to say, well, you had a soul contract for this, because that's like the worst thing you could ever say. But people usually, when they go through their natural, organic healing process, and that unfolds in whatever way it unfolds, and takes however long it takes, many times we do end up seeing, oh, I can see why that happened. It's not like we would, it's not like our personality would want to intentionally choose to go through that again. But when we're on the other side, we say, oh yeah, I can see why it had to happen that way. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Savannah. Oh, and she has a second comment that says, that does not take away the pain or the trauma, but it does give me greater understanding. Yes. Thank you for sharing that. Zahira says, thank you, Maya. Okay, good. I'm glad I answered your question, Zahira. Okay, we're almost done. Oh, good. My goal was to do about an hour, and that is about what we're going to do. Okay, so let's talk about some examples of negative contracts. And as I mentioned, negative soul contracts, I'm not talking about the negative spiritual interference, psychic attack type. I'm just talking about a normal soul contract that would include what might be thought of as some adversity. So you may have made a vow of suffering. That can be a negative soul contract, but you've chosen it. For some reason, you've chosen it. Maybe. Remember, not everything you're experiencing in your life is a soul contract. So we need to make sure not to go into that extreme thinking. But you may have chosen or taken on a vow of suffering. And here's where we get a little more complicated. I've talked mostly about how you've chosen your soul contracts, but sometimes when you make the choosing, it's not coming from a place of wholeness. Maybe in the lifetime right before this one, maybe you did something that you feel really bad about and you feel guilty about it. And so your soul chooses this vow of suffering, because that's what you feel that you need to experience. So not all of our soul contracts are chosen from a place of wholeness. Just because you're on the other side doesn't mean you're like completely evolved being, right? So you may have a vow of suffering. There's also a vow of poverty. A lot of people experience that. A vow of chastity. where maybe you've chosen, and maybe this might not be adversity. This might be good for you. You might decide, I don't want to have a partner in this lifetime, and I don't want to even have part-time partners. It's a vow of chastity. Or it could be something that you struggle with or suffer with, this vow of chastity, something that your personality does, your human aspect doesn't like that, being alone, being single. Okay, you might be at odds with that. It might feel like an adversity. You might have taken on that soul agreement of chastity because maybe you have a lot of past lives where you were a nun or a monk or a priest or something like that. That's a possibility. You may have a vow of victimization. And again, I don't think this is usually intentionally chosen. This is usually something that the soul chooses because there's been a pattern or there's a brokenness that has happened in previous incarnations. And so that choice was not made from a point of wholeness, but it still can be made, that contract agreement of victimization. Those are just a few. There are many that are more adverse or negative. And some of those, yes, once we've evolved on a personal level and we have the clarity to understand what's happening, then we can do a release or a resolution or a completion of those agreements. Okay. I'm just going to remind you again that you can go deeper with this topic with Carolyn Mace's book, Sacred Contracts. Her last name is spelled M-Y-S-S, excuse me, M-Y-S-S. You can find her on Amazon, Sacred Contracts, Carolyn Mace. And that's how you say her name, Mace. Okay, now, how to revoke those soul contracts. Here's an example of how I do my Facebook Lives, by the way, you guys, these free classes. I've given you a wealth of information on what these soul contracts are, all these different levels to help you understand. But we're gonna kind of end it at that point because it's going to get a lot more complex when we get into all the different ways that you can clear or rewrite your soul contracts, revoke negative soul contracts, take your power back, etc. And that is the kind of material, hands-on learning that we do in Spiritual Empowerment Academy. So I'm not trying to leave you on a cliffhanger, but it's the process. There's a lot of complexity to it. But I do feel like I wanted to recommend that book to you, Sacred Contracts, because I do feel like it will help you get started. If you're if you don't feel drawn to join Spiritual Empowerment Academy, I don't want to leave you with nowhere to go, nothing to grab onto. There are some basic formats that you can find, some real, just real basic ways that you can start the process. You can look at the book Sacred Contracts or look online. But a heads up, that is something that we're going to be covering in the coming months in Spiritual Empowerment Academy online. And the whole purpose of that group, of that online course group, it's more than a course because we meet together in classes. There's a lot of support. But, the whole purpose of that group is all these different aspects of helping you to become more empowered spiritually. And so one level of that is to be able to identify what your soul contracts are, if there are any negative ones, and then what to do to clear those. Now, as always, I don't want to leave you with nothing, no way to clear these. So I want to give you a few little really basic tips. If you're aware of a soul contract that is not serving you, then you can begin the work of releasing it by saying a prayer out loud or writing it down and then speaking it out loud. And you can think of it as a declaration, like I revoke, or I declare, whatever it is that you're declaring or revoking, or disavow if you're disavowing something. You could even create a simple ritual around releasing whatever this theme has been in your life. And you could also do energy work if you're someone who knows how to do Reiki. If you have studied at least through level 2 Usui Reiki, you can do long distance energy work into the past to send Reiki to you before you were born, when you were forming your soul contracts. You can work on undoing those with Reiki. So those are a few ideas to help you get started. And then of course we'll go like a million times deeper than that in the Spiritual Empowerment Academy. But prayer and declarations are way more powerful than you might think. Even a simple ritual of lighting a candle and writing out a declaration. So powerful, you guys. You'll get really far just with that. Okay. Also, I promised earlier that I would mention a referral to more information for those of you who may be experiencing a lot of negative spiritual interference, where you feel like there were some kind of negative forces that imposed adverse soul contracts onto you. And there's a video that I have that's just about that. And if you go to my YouTube channel, if you go to youtube.com and then go to and type into the search bar Psychic Protection Sanctuary, that's the name of my YouTube channel. And then the name of the video is Soul Contracts, and then the and sign, interference by negative spiritual forces. Soul contracts and interference by negative spiritual forces. I just wanted to make sure I went through that. But I'm also going to find that link and I'm going to post it in the description or the comments or somewhere that you can find when you're watching the replay of this. If you're watching it on YouTube, I will include the direct link in the description. Okay, so if you're watching this somewhere, just get yourself to this video on YouTube and I will include that spiritual interference video link right there in the description. Okay, because I go a whole other tangent direction, focusing more on all of the negative stuff and how all of that works. Now, I know some of you are interested in that and some of you not so much, and it felt like it was a good time to go over all of the basics and the nuts and bolts of just your basic soul contracts and what those are. So that is what this video was all about. Let's see if we have any other questions. Any other questions, everybody? Last chance. Oh, good. We have more comments. Savannah says, yes, absolutely. Marnie, I think, is either waving. I think that's a waving or a clapping of hands. I'm not sure, but right back at you, girl. Savannah says, thank you. And Tana says, popped in halfway through. Just didn't want to be a lurker. Thanks for joining, Tana. Okay, you guys, I'm going to finish with a quick announcement, and it's just for any newbies to let you know that we do have a free Facebook Live class in this Facebook group every month. The Facebook group is Spiritual Empowerment Community, and we have a free Facebook Live class every third Tuesday of the month. So be sure to join us. And I cover just various topics every month. The Spiritual Empowerment Community is where we talk about all sorts of spiritual stuff and developing your spiritual gifts and all sorts of interesting things like that. My other group, Psychic Protection Sanctuary, We have a free Facebook Live class in there every month as well. That group is a lot more intense. We talk about pretty intense paranormal and spiritual topics. And that is not everybody's cup of tea, which is why I keep it separate. So if that calls to you, or if you feel like you need it, go on over there and you can take part in those free classes. And if not, that is totally cool. You can enjoy all of the love and light and authenticity and groundedness in our spiritual empowerment community. Shout out to everybody who joined us live. Thank you for joining. And all of you who are watching the replay, thank you so much. I love all you guys. Thank you for being present. And I love sharing all of this information with everybody. Jessica says, dang it, I missed it. I'll have to catch the replay. Yes, you will. And I hope you enjoy it. Thanks, everybody. Signing off. And I look forward to our next Facebook Live in this group next month. Have a great week.